Hamas shows how evil they really are. Trump claims executive privilege for Barr, and there's some more presidential politics, along with lots and lots of stupidity. This is Matt Field, and this is Ditch Your Political Party podcast. So I'm going to start off with the Hamas real quick. Very, very evil group. I'm going to come right out and say that. There isn't any part of them that is actually looking for the salvation of others. They live under the belief that they need to kill those that aren't believers, those that don't believe in Allah, those that aren't, they're infidels essentially. And so what they've done is they've fired hundreds of missiles into Israel from the Gaza Strip to essentially kill anybody that they can kill. So, and people, a quick background real quick on the Gaza Strip. There are no Jews that live in the Gaza Strip for about 14 years, but they still are considered the occupation of the Gaza Strip. So there's kind of a big misconception, propaganda, whatever it may be, but there are no Jews that live in that area. But they're essentially firing missiles to hit Christians, Jews, whomever, in any area. These are civilian areas. They're actually targeting civilians. In fact, one of them hit a kindergarten. So there's some very bizarre things that are happening with. It's not bizarre things that are happening with Hamas. The thing that's probably most bizarre is that some people have come out and not fully condemned the whole idea of what Hamas is doing, but have turned on Israel and said that this is all on Israel, which is really weird because Israel is actually the one that has been defending these individuals, obviously, because it's their country. And they had something that's called the Iron Dome, which there was some funding from the United States in order to help with that. Beto O'Rourke, by the way, he did not vote to fund this, but this has prevented a lot of those missiles from hitting. But hundreds, maybe up to thousands, have been shot, and they unsuccessfully landed in many places. But others did hit. There was a pretty impactful movie where there's a woman who is speaking to reporters, and the alarm sounds that there are going to be some missiles fired, and she goes running into her home. So this is pretty disgusting. Again, and then how did Israel respond? Israel actually responded by striking terrorists, whereas Hamas is just basically shooting a missile wherever a missile will land. They don't really care where it lands as long as it inflicts the maximum amount of damage. So, a very evil world we live in today, and don't be confused, Hamas is a very evil group, and Israel had nothing to do with what happened here. And if there's anybody blaming Trump for this, it's also kind of a bizarre thing as well. Trump obviously established Jerusalem as the headquarters over there for the United States, as the capital, and which caused some issues. But this has nothing to do with that. Hamas has always been doing things like this, similar to ISIS. They've done what they can to exact their revenge, exact their doctrine, their false doctrine across the world. Because if there's anything, when you think logically, if you are doing things that actually, obviously, this benefits nobody but them, it's immoral to kill people. It's one thing if you're defending yourself, but it's something totally different if you are going to kill people purposefully just because of their beliefs. So Hamas is on my short list of evil groups. So I'm not going to cover much more on them. They don't deserve it, basically. But if we let's go into what's been causing everyone's brains to explode on the left side of the aisle, and maybe even some on the right. I'm not entirely sure, but most of what I've heard is from those on the left. Again, this is the whole idea here is we're trying to ditch our political party, right? We're trying to think independently of what everyone else is shouting in our ears. The analogy I always use is that, there's a little angel or devil sitting on your shoulder, whispering into your ear exactly the way you should think, exactly what you should say, and how you should do things. Now, this coming from political parties is a very troubling idea, And so, I don't know if I'm sure plenty have seen the movie. I'm trying to remember. It has Brad Pitt in it, and zombie apocalypse or something like that. It's World War Z. That's what it is. And what happens in this movie is at one point they find themselves, I think they're going to Jerusalem. They're trying to get into Jerusalem, and they had built a big wall around it. And he's speaking to one of the leaders, and the leader says that they developed this idea of the 10th man. That the 10th man will always, he can trump them all if he needs to. And so that's how we need to think, because many of the things that are brought before us, we've thought for so long that these things are okay, that these things are the way that they're supposed to be. And when a perfect example of this is, the Supreme Court justices. I remember when Beto O'Rourke had proposed that they have terms on them. Now, I believe he was doing this because, they're starting to get stacked with more conservative judges, and he wants more liberal judges on there, right? But he had mentioned that he wanted some term limits there. And at first when I heard that, I thought, wait a second. We've had it this way for a long, long time. So we need to continue to be like this for a long, long time. We shouldn't touch it. But when you think about the whole idea of whether or not there should be a Supreme Court justice sitting their entire life on the bench, and they're going to vote the exact same way for a very, very long time, or rule on different things for the same way throughout the rest of history, it would be better, I think, and beneficial to the American people and the United States in general to make sure that they have maybe a limited term there. Now, I don't know how long that would be, maybe 20 years or something like that, but, and not to mention, it's not as though we have to have just 9 justices. You can have more than 9 justices, or you can have less, whatever it may be, but I don't think it's a bad idea to have something like that. But I struggled with that a little bit when I originally heard it. And that's the same idea. When you hear different things that are based upon the idea of logic, and you've thought of it a different way for so long, it becomes very difficult for you to overcome. And that's the whole idea of that 10th man in World War Z, is that, hey, what if there was a zombie apocalypse? We should build a wall around this, blah, 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 whatever. So we need to function on the idea that we have to have our 10th man. That 10th man has to take whatever's being said and consider seriously what is being proposed, and determine whether or not it's something that's worthwhile. So, moving forward, that's how you need to think when you receive this different information. Okay, because if you're listening to the news, you're being inundated by all these different ideas, then you're going to have a difficult time digesting what I'm about to say with what Trump is saying about executive privilege for Barr. Now, just a quick thing here. Trump is exercising executive privilege. Ex-President Clinton exercised executive privilege 14 times in his administration. Obama did the same thing for Holder. Executive privilege has been exercised throughout history multiple times. So it's not like this is unusual that this is happening. What I take issue is when executive privilege is applied inappropriately. I think, honestly, the only time I believe executive privilege should be applied when you're coming before somebody, and it should only be on certain material. Okay, so, for example, if there's classified data that hasn't been unclassified, that can't be released to the public, then that portion of that questioning, you can say, I claim executive privilege on that particular item, right? Because you can't break the law, and that's the same thing that's happening here with Barr. Now, Trump is someone who could unclassify a lot of this information, and whether it be wise or not, we don't know. So, unclassifying data, I think as a general rule, you should unclassify data as soon as you believe it no longer has any threat upon whatever's working out there. I've recently been watching Madam Secretary, and there's information that in there that could be pretty startling in different areas of the world or with different relationships. And granted, no matter what you release, it's going to be startling, maybe to one degree or another. But the idea would be is that you would, is it just going to be a political thing, or is it actually going to put people in harm? Because we really shouldn't care that much about the politics. We should care much more about making sure the American people have access to this information, right? So when it comes to the information overall, I believe that it should be released as quickly as possible. My dad was in the military in Vietnam, and he said there were things that he was basically sworn to secrecy because he had top secret security clearance, and he didn't know if he could mention it or not, but he said, I don't think it's relevant, but it's possible that information is probably still classified. They just never released it. But frankly, they probably should have released it, especially after, 60 years, or however long it's been, 50 years of just being hidden away. So I mean, my opinion is executive privilege should apply very, very, very infrequently. And I believe that in this particular case with Trump, I'll kind of explain it out a little bit more, but I don't understand why there's executive privilege being claimed here, because I don't think there's any reason for it. So let me explain myself. But first, are you a business owner? You hear this from me often. There are many business owners out there that have inventory, products, components, ingredients, you name it, that they have excess of. They have too much of, and they need to basically get the money out of that in order to apply it to something that's going to be more effective for them. So how on earth do you do that? Do you call around? I mean, there's not that much you can do, right? If you can call your previous supplier and say, well, you bought it, no returns, right? If there was something wrong with it, we can replace that. But for the most part, those suppliers aren't going to do anything for you. But if you are battling with surplus or excess inventory, you can go to excesssuppplylist.com. This is where you can put the balance back in your favor. Excesssuppplylist.com is where you can list any excess inventory for free and get it sold. So go to excesssuppplylist.com, click on publish ad for free, and get it done. You literally have nothing to lose. So go to excesssuppplylist.com, list your excess or surplus inventory, and get that cash back in your pocket immediately. Again, that excesssuppplylist.com, excesssuppplylist.com. So executive privilege. First off, like I said, I don't think it should be claimed too frequently. Only in the event of maybe classified data that could be breached. And in many cases, I don't believe that classified data should be staying in the classified area for too long. It should be released at some point. Maybe there's some exceptions to that, but I think for the most part, that should be released before too long. So this is the biggest thing the biggest issue I have with the entire thing in general. They're talking about there's a big constitutional crisis, that the legislative branch isn't able to put the executive branch in check because they claim this executive privilege. So first off, I think it was dumb that Trump claimed executive privilege, because everything that the Democrats are asking for, and the lefts are, maybe it's not just the Democrats, but the leftists that are asking for is already available. Okay, Pelosi herself said that there should be some information redacted. We understand that, but what they're doing is a big hide-up, a big cover-up, and I don't understand that, because the entire report, okay, you got 4 pages of summary that was released by Barr originally, which is all he really needed to do. I mean, that's essentially what Comey sort of did. Well, Comey was dumb, but Comey came out and he basically berated Hillary Clinton, right, talking about all these different things, and he wrote an intent where intent was not required, and all these different things, which didn't make any sense. But he essentially was giving a summary, though. He was giving a summary of what they found in the investigation. Now, what happened after that? Well, not really much. In fact, the left jumped up and down. The Democrats jumped up and down, hooray, because she wasn't actually prosecuted. But the problem is then all that icky information was out there, and that may have actually cost her the election. I don't know if that's the case. We'll never know. But that's the interesting thing here, is he released kind of a statement, 4-page summary perhaps, that kind of just laid out what had happened and what he believed was the case based on the evidence provided, and that he couldn't actually bring charges. Nor, by the way, again, as mentioned before, would Robert Mueller recommend any charges. So they don't have the evidence in order to go for it. So they want to hold Barr in contempt because he's not going to come and testify before them, but now he's claiming executive privilege. So what's the big issue? I would love just to ask this question. What's the problem? You have all the information before you. Then they say, well, there's a bunch of redacted information. Okay, well, there's 6 Democrats that have seen all that redacted information except 2 lines. And those 2 lines are prohibited to be seen because it's based on what the grand jury has done. And it would be illegal for Barr to let that information out. By the way, that law was created by the legislative branch, by Congress. So if they have an issue with that, then, I mean, it's 2 lines. It's 2 lines of 450 pages. Okay, this is not a big problem. So there are 6 Democrats, and they haven't come forth and said anything in particular, and they don't see the reason for it. Maybe they will at some point. Maybe they're building something. I'm not sure. But as far as I can tell, there's no reason for them to claim any executive privilege, except if they're trying to push him on saying something about those 2 lines that have been redacted. But he's not going to say anything anyway, because he can just cite the federal law that says that I cannot release grand jury testimony information. And so that's the only part. So I don't understand what the constitutional crisis is. I don't understand why there was executive privilege claimed, and I do not understand why this entire investigation isn't over. So if you're on the board, if you're on the side of we need to keep looking into this, there's been $35 million spent and 450 pages. This might be the most comprehensive report on any investigation ever done. Now, I could be wrong, but when you spend nearly 3 years on this thing, spend that much money to accomplish it, and then the main prosecutor, the guy that's over the entire thing, comes out and says, hey, I don't like that you didn't include the mood of the way we felt and how we don't like Trump, and when you read through it, based on the information I've seen, is that it's pretty clear they didn't like Trump very much. And let's face it, I mean, Trump is a really polarizing character. Some days I'm okay with him. I've never liked Trump, honestly, but there's some days I'm okay with him, and other days I'm like, oh my goodness, this guy, you know. So he's one of those guys that, you know, you shrug your shoulders at how dumb he is sometimes, but then other times you're like, well, that was good. But then other times you're like, well, that was really dumb. So, I mean, again, you can do this with any politician. It doesn't have to just be with Trump. You know, it can be with anybody. There's a lot of politicians that do dumb stuff. There's a lot of administrators that do dumb stuff. In this case, I do not believe what Barr has done is dumb. I think he's actually followed the law to a T here, and he's done a very good job. Now, I don't know why Trump is claiming executive privilege. I'm not sure why, but I think it's really just to protect Barr from potentially releasing information that could be incriminating to him, which then would put him in a position where he could be impeached for releasing grand jury information. My suggestion to those that still believe this investigation needs to take place is that the executive branch, they have investigative powers. Guess who else has investigative powers? The legislative branch. Okay? The legislative branch, they can conduct their own investigation. So go ahead and conduct it. If you believe that Trump he's done things that have caused obstruction of justice, and you believe that you can bring some charges, then do it. No one's stopping you. I don't know. I just don't understand why they're still, they're circling their wagons around something that is dead. I mean, there's nothing else to be done. So, anyways, that's the whole deal with the Barr. I don't understand why there's a constitutional crisis, nor do I understand why they're continuing to go after this. As I've said probably about 9 million times on the show, is that if there's anything anyone needs to look at, it is our national debt and our liabilities, right? But nobody cares about that because nobody wants to actually do that. Trump doesn't care about it. Nobody in Congress seems to care about it, except for maybe a few individuals. But even then, there's not a majority at all to prevent anything like that from happening. I was watching again. I've been watching Madam President lately, and there was a really, really, really good line from there was something that happened, and the Secretary of State brings in the Chinese ambassador, and they're talking, and she asks if they had committed this act against the United States, and he said, no, you know, we don't plan to do that. We don't have any interest in doing that, all that sort of thing. And he said, when we come for you, so he said China started out with 6% of the United States debt. Now they're at 21, probably more now. 25% of the U.S. debt. It would be terrible for them to do something like that to the United States because it would affect their portfolio. So they've got this much debt. They own that much debt of the United States. I should look up and see how much it is, but so they own so much of this debt. And he says, when we come for you, it's not going to be military. It's going to be because we're going to repossess you. And that's, I mean, it's like the lurking cancer. You know, it's in my family, they call it the silent killer. It's hypertension, right? Your blood pressure is just quietly raises. You don't notice anything in your daily life. There's nothing that actually happens. There's that sort of thing. But eventually it raises to that point where you have a stroke, right? And that affects you significantly because that causes issues in your brain. It can cause issues all over your body, wherever it may be, because of that stroke. And so this whole idea of you know, China they're playing the long game where they just eventually plan to repossess us. They're not interested really in fighting us, because who can really go against the United States when it comes to fighting? And nobody. You know, we got way too much defense. We've been investing there for a long time. So what is China doing? They're using that version of hypertension to quietly and securely eventually cause a stroke on the United States because we can't seem to spend our money correctly. So, pretty crazy, right? That's what we should really be talking about, but instead we're talking about a constitutional crisis, about Trump claiming some executive privilege where probably he didn't need to do it, but maybe he was protecting Barr because he didn't want to release the those scary 2 lines of grand jury testimony, which is against the law, which was established by the legislative branch, who, honestly, they're probably the people that established that are still sitting in that room, right? Because the Democrats have a higher average age than the Republicans. So, you know, kind of a funny concept. But the whole thing is it's just a bunch of hullabaloo. Again, as this happens all the time, political stunts are just that. I mean, they're just stunts. Nothing's actually happening. It's just big hollow log. There's nothing there. So we move on to some information. So real quick thing here is that the tax returns have finally there's been some released about 30 plus years ago, right? Somehow they got their hands on them, and it shows that Trump lost like $1 billion or something like that back then, which basically everybody knew because of the issues he had with casinos, the issues he had with some of his properties, but it doesn't prove anything. It doesn't say anything about it. And they're speculating there's even more problems with it. But, you know, if he's under audit, then he's under audit, right? So that's how you go after somebody for tax evasion. That's how you go after somebody with their finances, is you sick the IRS on them. And someone like Donald Trump, I am not surprised if he is audited every single year because he has so much money. So he's audited every single year, and that's just the way it is. And probably the only thing that they'll find is that, hey, maybe Trump just doesn't have as much money as he does, because he's a guy, he's a blowhard. He inflates everything. So if he's going to inflate his ability to be a president, if he's going to inflate his ability to get things done, he's probably going to inflate the amount of money he actually has. And there's nothing wrong with me saying I'm a multi-billionaire and not being a billionaire, right? It just makes me a liar. But that doesn't have anything to do with taxes, you know. I can say I'm a multi-billionaire, but as soon as you look at my taxes, you'll be like, oh, no, you're not. And so that's the same sort of thing that's happened with Trump. It's nothing. There's nothing there. Should he release his taxes? You know, again, it kind of comes back to the whole idea of data. Any data that, if you're going into a public position, your life is now public. And so essentially what Trump has done here is he's exercised his personal classification. So he's classified his own documents, his own tax returns, because he doesn't want people to see what he's done with his money, the way he's used it, all this sort of thing. Now, again, if it was illegal, he already would have been gone after by the IRS. And there's probably litigation pending with him with some issues that have happened with his money, but it's not to the point where, where he's going to be kicked out or thrown behind bars or whatever, or seemingly that's the case, right? Otherwise, the IRS would have done their job already, because he's been in the billionaire status for basically his whole life because Daddy gave him lots of money. So, I don't think there's anything here that is. He's classified his data. Should he release his tax returns? Yes, because basically, as soon as you can unclassify that data, you should unclassify that data if you're in public life. That's the same thing with anybody. If you decide to go in public life, be ready for your life to be open to the entire world. And that's what should prevent a lot of people from going into public life. Anyway, so then we move on to a bit more politics here. But before that, we got some big news on Joe Biden. We've got some different things on even AOC. AOC is hitting the docket yet again with her amazingness. But we're going to talk about autoimmune health and nutrition. So if you are living the paleo, keto, AIP, or SED diet, if you are struggling with autoimmune disease, if your medication is not working. Now, this isn't a catch-all for you. This isn't going to do anything. But basically, the simple idea of these diets is to just remove the food that you consume that causes inflammation in your body. So if you are willing to go to that point, then you should take a look at autoimmune health and nutrition. This started when a sister educated a brother, and a brother helped a sister. Their line of 100% paleo, keto, SED, and AIP proteins are number one on the market. They're the cleanest option available and taste great. Go to autoimmunehn.com. Use promo code DYPP at checkout to get 20% off your entire order. If you are tired of the conventional way of healing, try autoimmunehn.com. Help you along that holistic path. So go to autoimmunehn.com. Again, autoimmunehn.com. Use promo code DYPP at checkout to get 20% off. Again, autoimmunehn.com. So there have been many that have speculated that Joe Biden, and what Sleepy Joe is what Trump likes to call him, that Joe Biden was his first day was going to be his best day. But turns out he's actually doing quite well. He is dominating in the polls. Dominating. I mean, there's no contest right now. Now, whether that's going to remains to be seen. Again, politics can turn on a dime. But as it stands right now, if the election were held today, Joe Biden would run away with the nomination, no problem. He is at 40%, and the closest person in that polling data, the next one is Bernie Sanders at 17%. It's for Bernie, it's like, oh my heck, all over again. He was probably hoping that this time he would have, because he was running away with it. Bernie was the man. But now that Joe Biden is in the race, he's dominating, which is really bizarre to me. Because Joe Biden, right, he's an old school politician, right? He's been there since well before I was born, and he's been doing it for a very, very long time. Everybody knows who Joe Biden is if you are in Washington. But the whole world knows who Joe Biden is now because he was the vice president to Barack Obama. So now that he's in, he's getting a lot of traction. But before Joe Biden was in, Bernie was dominating. And they have totally different agendas, at least for now. Bernie is Mr. Socialist, and he's not shy about saying that. And then you have Joe Biden, who is more of a centrist, right? He's talking more along the lines of what they used to do, basically the old blue-collar Democrat, right? That's basically who Joe Biden is, and that's appealing to a lot of people. So now he dominates the polls. So I find it curious that you have this declared socialist that was winning before Joe Biden got in, and Joe Biden's back in, who expresses more conservative messages than anybody else in the party right now. So, but he's already starting his move to the left to appease some of the members of his party, and I don't know how that's going to go. He's probably going to continue to do things like that, just because he's going to find himself in a situation where someone's going to ask him that question that, hey, why'd you do this, or why'd you do that, or whatever, and he's going to get slammed. And he's going to get slammed by the public more so than anything else, because he's going to try to appease the person to whom he's speaking. Now, I think probably the purest character of Joe Biden was when he launched. And that's probably what you're going to get when he's in the White House. If he's in the White House, I guess I should say. Because he actually stands a much better chance of winning against Donald Trump than anybody else in the race right now. If he wants to compete against Trump and he wants to win, he needs to pull a Trump, right? Donald Trump is the Captain Double Downer, right? He does not care. He will continue to double down on whatever he says, whenever he says it, because he's someone that doesn't back down. Now, half the time he's wrong, right? But Joe Biden is experienced enough that he probably would do pretty well with that strategy. The problem is I don't think he can stand the pressure. I mean, it's a pressure cooker, when you got all these leftists running at you. Now, if there's one thing I could probably compliment those that are on the left, is that when they decide they're going to do something, man, they are relentless, and they get everybody behind them. How do they do that? I don't know. But if you're on the Republican conservative side, you find yourself, you want to really push something, then the media buries you. They find a way to get rid of you somehow, or there's no way you find out about something. And speaking of which, right, there was a shooting in Colorado this week. Anyone know about a shooting in Colorado? It was at a school. Can you believe that? But there was nothing reported on it. I found out about it through my wife, actually, because she told me about this. She saw it on Facebook. It is actually, there's some LDS kids, Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. He was a priest, and just so you know, priest is they're typically 15 to 16 years old. Excuse me, 15 to 18 years old. That's what a priest is in the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. They have specific responsibilities. And so he's at school, and there are some members. These guys are getting ready to shoot, and he actually stood in front and took some bullets for some classmates. He's actually going to be fine, but there were others that had passed. And I commend him for his bravery. I commend him for his willingness to give his life for someone else. And few people, first of all, would do that. And second, few people have the opportunity. And most of the time, I would say that if they found themselves in that situation, they would react in a self-preservation type of way. But this kid didn't. So, very impressive. Our prayers go out to their family, and we hope the best for them. But outside that point, the thing that blows my mind is there was a shooting in Colorado at a school, and nothing was said about it on the national news. Nobody heard about it. I didn't hear about it except for just sort of local things coming through. And that blows my mind. The only reason it didn't get the attention that it deserved was because, first off, it had nothing to do with any racial, ethnic, whatever. Had nothing to do with anything in the intersectional hierarchy. All it had to do was about someone almost giving their life for someone else. Why isn't that reported? What's wrong with our society when we want to report things that only advance our political motives rather than those things that are good and wholesome and all that sort of thing? This is newsworthy. This is national newsworthy. But you know what else what got way more press than this is there was at a commencement speech at BYU, my alma mater, which is obviously LDS. It's owned by the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. This guy announces that he's gay, right? He announces that he's gay. And if you're familiar with the faith, you'll know that if you engage in that activity, the activity of homosexual activity, then it is a sin. And, that's obviously frowned. Sinning is not looked upon with, it's not a good thing, obviously, if you sin. And so now I don't believe he engaged in that sort of thing. I don't think he engaged in that. But he basically said that, I've got the predisposition to be attracted to the other sex, to the same sex. Excuse me. I feel like I'm homosexual, right? So he comes out of the closet at commencement speech. It was approved by BYU and all that sort of thing, and that's fine. But this happens. Someone announces this, and this gets press galore. He's on national news. He goes on Ellen. He goes all these things. And then there's this kid who literally stands in front of a bullet, 2 bullets, and not a peep. Today, our warriors are those that stand in the intersectional hierarchy. If you are a white male defending a white female against another white male, they don't care. However, if you are gay, or if you are black, or if you possess some ethnic something, then we will be all over it. Isn't that bizarre? Isn't that so bizarre? One guy says, I have the predisposition to be gay, and I did nothing for this, right? I've got it, but I've done nothing for it. But since I'm in a school that says that committing gay homosexual acts is a sin, I get a bunch of news coverage. So, I mean, just think about that. Think about how silly that is. That's not logical at all. So those that believe that this is something that's okay, you've got your wires crossed. Okay, we celebrate those because in the LDS community, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if you had the predisposition to be gay, the predisposition to be homosexual, then that's a tough road. If you truly believe in keeping the commandments that have been set forth, then that is a very difficult path. So for that to be celebrated, I'm confused by that. So the weird qualifications to make it into the national news. So couple final thoughts here is I want to hit up Bernie Sanders and AOC. Okay, so they're coming together right now. Oh, sorry, just a second. I've got to make sure I announce the Convention of States. So if you have not already heard of this, Convention of States, it's a great concept. Okay, it's where we are able to pass an amendment through the states in order to impose upon our federal government. And so, but that's a process in which it has to take place, and most of the time it's a very slow process. But Utah's on board. There's probably 18 other states, maybe 20 states at this point that are on board. So we got a ways to go. But you have to have 2/3 of the states to get it done. And so what you can do is you can go to conventionofstates.com and sign the petition. And you can donate a little money, help them along their path. So again, it's conventionofstates.com. Go on there, sign up. This will allow us to pass an amendment like term limits for our senators and our congressmen and women. Who, some of them, like I said, Nancy Pelosi's been there for 100 years. So has Chuck Schumer. So have a bunch of other people. We don't need them there that long. Okay, that's how corruption begins. And so this is the whole idea of draining the swamp that was presented by the Trump administration. And what a great concept that is. But the only way that's going to happen is if we pass it ourselves. If we pass it to the states. There's no way these senators and congressmen are going to do anything about it. So conventionofstates.com, go there, sign the petition, get it done. Bernie Sanders and AOC are campaigning together. Isn't that so funny? The oldest Democrat and the youngest Democrat. Just kidding. I don't know if Bernie's the oldest, but AOC's got to be one of the youngest as far as Congress goes. But they are advocating for a 15% cap on credit card interest. Now, anytime the federal government proposes something like this, I have a problem with, because I don't like regulation. I don't like things like that. So immediately I pull back. Because why are we asking companies to put a 15% cap on their credit card. You know what this is going to do? This is going to do two things. Let's do many more things, but the two I'm going to discuss. One is when you have 15, typically if you've got a 15% credit card, you're doing pretty well, credit-wise. So those companies that have the 15% cap, they are, if you've got a credit card that has a 15% cap, that's your maximum, then you've probably got a pretty good credit score for the most part. And so obviously it limits the ability that the credit card company has on making money on you, because if you've got good credit, you're going to pay your bill, right? And maybe you'll push it out a little bit farther, and maybe you'll be paying interest on it, but it's at 15%. And so if you decide to put a 15% cap on all credit cards, you know what's going to happen? Those that actually need credit, or they need something like that, or they need a credit card and they have terrible credit, there's no way they're going to qualify for these cards because it's too risky. That's the whole point, right? That's why they charge interest. They're going to charge interest. That interest is going to accrue, and eventually it's sent to the bill payer, or the bill collectors. And so as soon as this sort of thing happens, there are plenty of people who have terrible credit scores, and there's no way they would get a credit card with a 15% rate on it. There's no way, because there's too much risk associated with them. So what the federal government is doing is saying, hey, those of you that have capitalized on those, and basically what happens though is it's those that are poor that have fallen into this issue. So those that are poor cannot get a decent credit card because they don't pay their bills. Credit cards are based on credit. If you have terrible credit, then don't get a card. And if you are getting a card with a 60% interest rate, don't get that card. Okay? No one is forcing you to get that credit card. Okay? So the whole idea that putting a cap on credit cards is going to do something is ridiculous, right? If everyone is thinking logically, okay, this is just me, but if everyone is thinking logically, why would you ever get a credit card that is going to charge you 50-60%? Why would you do it? It's stupid. It's so stupid. Don't do it. Wait. Okay? Now, granted, there's going to be times when you need cash right away, or whatever the case may be. If you're in that situation, most likely you need to budget your books better. And if you need food, there is a safety net for that the United States provides. So the only way you're going to effectively take care of this is if you are willing to manage your money. But if you're going to spend willy-nilly, do whatever you want, this is going to be a huge detriment to companies that work off that. But honestly, if you were thinking logically, those companies would never exist to begin with. So the whole idea of putting a 15% cap on credit card interest is silly to me, because you shouldn't be getting anything that's more than that anyway. Okay, so if they put it, but the problem is if they put it on, there are still companies that function along those lines. You watch plenty of shows where people are trying to make their bills, trying to do those different things, and so they go in for, a title loan or something like that. They know they're going to get charged a lot at the pawn shop or whatever. It's the same idea, same idea with a credit card. You don't use it for emergencies or something like that. Those still merit some level of use, but it's nothing that is, in my opinion, is anything that you should be wasting your time with. So it's a short-term type thing. So if people need to get on a credit card that's doing 50% or 40% or something like that for a small period of time while they get their books together, then fine. But putting a 15% cap on a credit card interest is, again, it's just silly. It's another one of those regulations that don't need to exist. And so why are we going after them? All they're trying to do is they're trying to appease. This is a political move. They're trying to appease those that are poor, those that don't do well with their money, and they're trying to collect a vote. So don't be fooled by this whole idea. Lastly, the Trump administration are just doing something really dumb, is they are putting more and more tariffs on China. Okay, they're putting 25%, 10%, 25% tariffs on China. You know what's going to happen? I'm in the industry. I have purchased ingredients. I've purchased various things from China. When those things come across, when they arrive here, what happens is the people that are this is all passed along. So all this money is coming out of our pockets, coming out of the small business owner's pocket, and it goes to the federal government because we carry that cost. So now, instead of your shirt being $10, it's going to be $12.50. That $2.50 is just going to go directly to you. Nothing, and then when they resell it, they're just going to pass it on, unless they're willing to absorb that cost. But at some point, it's going to be passed on to someone else. It's not going to affect China. Okay? So, anyways, it's a silly idea. The idea of tariffs is silly to begin with. World trade is a good thing. We need competition amongst all different countries. We need to interact freely so that we can continue to get the best deal across the world as we can. You know, some people don't agree with that whole concept. I don't understand. I really don't understand the whole idea that you're losing manufacturing jobs when you send it over to China, right? Those individuals, we all need to adapt. We need to improve. Now, if we were still functioning the same way we did, in fact, I was helping someone get a job the other day, and they mentioned, hey, well, it's a pharmaceutical job, and they said, would I be counting pills? You know, well, maybe in 1930 you were counting pills, and maybe that was a job in 1930, but now you got machines that count the pills, and you don't have to worry about that part. You operate the machine, and if you had people in there counting pills, you know how long that would take? It would be insanity. In any case, the economy is going to continue to move forward. Technology is going to continue to move forward. If you are worried about your job, you're worried about your situation, you're worried about losing your job to overseas, educate yourself. Do whatever you need to do to be able to make lateral moves or a step up into management or whatever it may be so that you can improve, right? And that's not nowadays this is not a difficult thing. There is so much online that can be obtained for free. There is so much. It's just a matter of willingness. It's a matter of putting yourself out there, willing to do those different things that perhaps you didn't want to do before. But again, it's on the basis of self-preservation and taking care of your family. You have to be willing to do things that potentially you didn't want to do originally in order to make the money that you need. But to have a full function, the problem with China is not the manufacturing. The problem with China is their stealing of intellectual property. That's the problem with China. And how to enforce that is very difficult because you have to go to World Trade, and then you have to kind of work that out, and they're notorious for not paying their fees and all these different things. And so it's a difficult situation how you respond to that. If it were me, anything that was counterfeit, the problem is there's no way that the federal government can really monitor that. If it's counterfeit, then it's just turned away, right? That's an idea, but then you may create a black market for that. So there's not an easy way to approach that. Basically, it's creating what the Trump administration is doing, which is good, is they're trying to force China to create a law that prevents them from doing that sort of thing, so they don't renege on it later on. So that's really the biggest thing that they could do, but likely won't happen. The best thing you can do if you own something like that and China's coming after it is you protect it the best you can and you avoid it getting in China's hands for as long as you can. So anyways, so the world is not as crazy as you think it is. We aren't having a constitutional crisis. Really what we need to pay attention to is our morality and the illogical steps that are made by our politicians and people every day. So share us. Ditch that political party. Share us. Doesn't matter where you're from, what you came from, what you're used to. We just need to get that 10th man mentality and understand that, hey, we can begin to adjust. We can begin to understand the logic that exists, and we'll all improve. So like us, subscribe, do whatever you got to do, but help us grow. All right, thanks, guys.